Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Robin Blakeman, and I'm a steering committee member of West Virginia Interfaith Power and Light and an ordained Presbyterian minister. We're here today because of a critical issue, not only to the Ohio River Valley, but to the global struggle against the increasingly evident effects of climate change. The PTTG cracker plant is one of many proposed projects within the Appalachian Petrochemical Storage Hub, a hundreds of miles long complex of petrochemical development slated for the Ohio River Valley from Monachos, Pennsylvania to the Huntington, West Virginia, Ashland, Kentucky area. This proposed development will further jeopardize the Ohio River, already called the most polluted waterway in our nation, and the tap water source for 5 million people. It will also impact areas that are already highly polluted and/or sites of endangered aquatic wildlife. Further, the Appalachian Storage Hub, when fully built, will spur an exponential increase in gas fracking operations in order to provide the feedstock for the primary product to be produced from this complex, plastic nurdles, or little tiny plastic pellets. We at West Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, which I am a steering committee member of, and the Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition, which is my employer, are highly concerned about this project. And I want to stop here and thank OVEC for hosting this event today. This project's potential adverse impacts on our state and region are huge. Already we have seen reports that the economics of the proposed project simply do not warrant the massive investments being made by border states and our federal government. Today, you will hear from 3 speakers, all of whom live and have faith community affiliations in the area that will be most impacted by one of the petrochemical cracker plants. That's chemical cracker plants. The PTTG cracker plant is proposed for Belmont County, Ohio. You will hear about their particular concerns and also some inspiring words from their faith perspectives. If you listen closely, you may hear of other visions for the Ohio River Valley, which could be more sustainable and wholesome for the residents of the communities along the river. We encourage you at the conclusion of this event to consider participating in our Faith Leaders Letter campaign originated by West Virginia Interfaith Power and Light. We will place a link to this in the chat during the event, and links can also be found on OVEC's Facebook site and the West Virginia IPL Facebook site. And I want to stop here and say that this event is being recorded today for later broadcast on social media pages. So please be aware of that. And now I want to move to a personal reason for being involved in this campaign. As a resident of an Ohio River Valley community, Huntington, West Virginia, I am highly concerned about this issue due to the fact that my entire immediate family and my current faith community gets our tap water from the Ohio River. And I know our water company does not have a viable backup plan if a major spill or pollution event happens in the river. I'm also aware that our atmosphere cannot handle the increased methane emissions that will result from extra fracking, pipeline leaks, etc., if all these petrochemical projects are built. To me, this is a human health issue, and the potential cost just seems too high. While I could expound on my particular faith perspectives on the overall situation we face with water pollution, water withdrawals, and increasing greenhouse gas emissions, I think I will let a quote that was sent to me by one of our speakers have the last word in my presentation. Sister Carmella, who's with us today, sent this quote from Elizabeth Johnson, a sister of St. Joseph from Brentwood, New York. She wrote a book titled Ask the Beasts about the environment and our responsibility to care for it. The title comes from the book of Job, chapter 12, verses 7. But ask the beasts to teach you, and the birds of the air to tell you. This is the quote from Elizabeth Johnson's book. Once one understands the evolving community of life on earth is God's beloved creation, and its ruination is unspeakable sin, then deep affection shown in action on behalf of eco-justice becomes an indivisible part of one's life. I agree wholeheartedly with Sister Carmella that this is an appropriate reflection of what we are working for, to work for eco-justice as part of our lives together in the Ohio Valley. I hope you will enjoy the videos that follow from our three speakers. The first speaker is Vincent DeGeorge. He is a concerned Ohio River residents group leader, as well as a board member with the Catholic Committee for Appalachia and the Catholic Worker House and a Catholic worker at the House of Hagar in Wheeling, West Virginia. So now we're going to hear what Vincent has to say.
Hello, I'm Dr. Vincent DeGeorge, a member and board member of the Catholic Committee of Appalachia and a Catholic worker at the House of Hagar in Wheeling, West Virginia. I was asked to speak a bit about the proposed cracker plastics plant and the larger fossil fuel buildout in the Ohio River Valley. I'm from West Virginia. I know the tremendous good of this place, the generosity and contributions of our people, and of course our natural beauty. As we like to say, God bestows many blessings and promises on that holy mountain. I also know our struggles, the difficulty and exploitation we faced, and the results of which we still face. Compromised environment, pollution, damaged forest, mountains, nature, and even a disproportionate cause of climate change, and consequently compromised people, poverty, drugs, depression, unhealthiness, loss of opportunity, and even hope. We've seen the results of this fossil fuel industry in Appalachia, and they want to expand it. As believers in science, we realize that this fossil fuel buildup, and specifically this cracker plastics plant, is the same pollution-driven and pollution-creating system that hurts creation, both people and the environment. As long as plastics comes from fossil fuels, we know we have to stop. We don't have a solution for plastic pollution. It's been 70 years. Instead, we've been lied to about false solutions. But as a person of faith, I realize that we have an obligation to protect creation, both nature and our most vulnerable people. Catholic Christians have a strong tradition of care of creation. From recent encyclicals like Laudato Si, Carita Amazonia, or We're All Family, All of Us, to our sacred tradition of saintly stewardship, gardeners, farmers, pastors. You can think of Isidore, Francis, Jesus himself, all the way back to when Eve and Adam were made as part of and along with creation itself. We honor God by honoring creation. And in protecting creation, we protect people, especially our most vulnerable who need that help. And the sad, repeated, and now undeniable fact is that this fossil fuel and plastics industry does not help either its own workers or their communities. Instead, it compromises their health and their homes. It denies people and their communities the dignities and opportunities they were made for. So what can we do? We can do our part, our sacred Christian calling. We can use our voices, our testimony, our stories, and speak up. We can use our hands, our talents, our actions, and get involved. and we can use our prayers, our communities, our faith as part of this effort. Practically, sign the faith leaders letter. Call up Pastor Robin and see how you can help with OVEC. Call CORE if you're in the Northern Panhandle and get involved. But most of all, as Christians or Catholics or believers in God or members of our whole human family, bring our well-formed conscience on this issue to all the aspects of our lives as you yourself know how. Thank you very much for your time.
Speaker is Father or Monk Michael Zybert, and I hope I didn't butcher your last name, who is a pastor with the Life-Giving Fountain Greek Orthodox Church in Martins Ferry, Ohio.
Trying to envision a better future for the valley and the people who live here. To me, it's a spiritual matter because we're dealing with the whole reality, not fragmented things. This world is a gift from God. It is the vehicle of God's grace and blessing to us. And what we have to offer back in worship and praise and thanks. The world was always filled with that kind of spiritual dimension. The mystery of the seed and the sprouting and the growth of the crop, the fertility and growth of the herds. The farmer, the herdsman knew this. The hunter who knew that the life that was taken was to support his own life and those around him. And that appreciation of the wholeness of the web of life was always expressed in every culture and in every people, usually in a religious form. And the church, the traditional Christian church, still remembers that cycle of life, of growth, of harvest, and celebrates it. Celebrates in the blessing of water, in the blessing of planting, harvest. But that's been forgotten too often in modern, urban cultures that are cut off from the natural cycle of creation. That's not healthy. And so, from the position of faith, from the perspective of faith, we need to put things back together and recognize that damage to my neighbor is sin. Damage to the world that supports my neighbor is ecological sin. And that's the first point in my consideration of our situation and this particular effort with this faith leaders letter. The second point is a matter of life, of how we live, of a vision concretely for our daily living. To have a culture that is healthy here, we need productivity. I'm looking for a prosperous sufficiency, a recognition of when enough is enough. And a prosperous sufficiency means we need productivity. Real productivity that feeds and supports the people that are here. Historically, in the last 100 years, we've usually thought in terms of heavy industry, of extractive coal, producing steel, and shipping all the profits out of the valley, leaving behind contamination and poison and derelict mills. Somebody thinks now that after that's crashed, we should go ahead with gas and plastic and chemicals in the same extractive manner. Maybe we need a new paradigm, a new worldview, something that looks to employment for the people here, profit for the people here. And the industry tells us half the time that the local people in the valley are not qualified for the good-paying jobs. If that is so, why do we need this particular kind of industry? Why not foster local, small-scale productivity? Entrepreneurs that build here, with jobs that are here, with economic benefits that are here and stay here for the people. We want whatever comes economically in the valley to be for the well-being of the valley, of the people, and of the place that we live in. To conserve the good things. We want to be real conservatives of what is blessed. And maybe not encourage damage. And so, yes, this world is a gift from God. It is a vehicle of God's grace and blessing to us, what we have to offer back. And God will not smile if we trash the gift. And so I support this.
Our next speaker is Sister Carmella Campione. And again, I apologize if I messed up your last name. Of the Order of St. Joseph.
I'm Sister Carmella. I'm a Sister of St. Joseph, and I live in Wheeling, West Virginia. I serve on the Peace and Justice team for the Congregation of St. Joseph. And two of our priorities for the past 2 years and into the next 5 years is consciousness transformation and the environment. We combine these two simply because we have to make people aware of the problems that we're having with our environment. And we have a big thrust of our ministry is education, awareness, and advocacy on the part of the environment. I think it's rather appropriate that we're gathered together here in the month of October because in the Christian world, we just finished celebrating the season of creation. 2.5 billion Christian people all over the world celebrated from September 1st until October the 4th. The theme of this year's celebration is New Rhythms and New Hope. Because of the awareness that most people are now getting, we have hope that we can make a transformational change in people's attitudes. 2020 is also the 5th anniversary of Pope Francis, the present pontiff in Rome, of his encyclical letter, Laudato Si, Our Common Home. Pope Francis wrote this letter for the whole world, not just for the Catholic Church. And it was circulated and has made a difference in the politics of many countries and in the political parties in many countries. The reason that I am involved in and aware of the PTG plant that's going to supposedly to be built in Dilly's Bottom in Ohio is that it certainly does not follow the social justice of the Catholic Church, nor the justice that we expect in our own country, that people have the right to equality of life. The reason that I think that the PTG plant should not be built is one, it's going to manufacture plastic. The world is already flooded with enough plastic. We don't need any more. Our rivers, our beaches, our seas, our oceans are flooded with plastic trash and no place to store it and no place to recycle it. I read recently that less than 10% of the plastic manufactured each year is recycled. This also will endanger the quality of life for people who live here in the Ohio Valley. The toxic waste from the plant will pollute the Ohio River, which is a source of water for us and our quality of life. It will pollute the air, which we need to breathe. It also will pollute the soil, which is a source of life for us because that's where plants and animals grow and live, as well as for us. It will also not be a source for quality of life for recreation because it would not be safe to be outside for children to play, for us to go to parks, for us to go to the beach, to go to the riverfronts. One of the arguments that's being made about building the plant is that it will provide jobs and improve the economy in the Upper Ohio Valley. That has been a premise for many projects in the United States, but when it finishes, there are not many jobs and the quality of life has changed. What we need to work for is what Pope Francis calls for in Laudato Si, environmental justice, where we combat poverty, improve the economy, protect God's creation, and improve the life of every citizen. That means there needs to be dialogue between environmentalists, between educators, between manufacturers, and between government, particularly government agencies that have to do with the environment. I think it's important for people to realize that we can't give up on any issue that means a great deal to the quality of our lives. And I recently read a biography of Margaret Mead, who was a 20th century anthropologist, and she wrote, "Never believe that a few caring people can't change the world. That's all who have ever made any change in the world." And Pope Francis in his encyclical wrote, "What is needed is a politics foresighted and capable of new integral and interdisciplinary approach to the crisis of economy and environment." He also preached to a group of young people about 6 months ago and said, "Politics is the highest form of charity and love because it serves the common good." The research that was recently done in Harvard studied 300 mass movements that have made a change in our world in the 20th century. And in that research, 3.5% of the population of that particular area were active in protests and petitions, and they forced a tangible change. So child labor laws were changed, unions were formed, compulsory education, and the beginning of the integration of the races, particularly here in the United States. I recently watched a video of young college students gathered in Baltimore, and they are working for climate change in their generation. And he ended his presentation by saying, "You are an informed, passionate person. Our cry must be zero. Zero emissions, zero excuses, and it's zero time to waste." So this should make it possible for us to at least get a new rhythm and a new hope. And we can say we have a resolve for a mission to prevent additional petrochemical development in our home, the Ohio Valley.
Those are some wise words for sure. We're going to open up microphones for any questions that anyone might have. We can also take questions in chat with this meeting. And participants could also discuss among each other the various comments that have been made.
Thanks, Robin. Are the speakers allowed to ask questions too?
Oh, sure. Go for it, Vincent.
maybe just to start off until other ones come in, it struck me a lot of similar language in the three talks there. Let's see, Father Mike, it struck out. Well, let's see, even just like the examples of pastors, farmers, I think came up in Monk Mike's language too. And then Sister Carmella, you really linked your care of creation in with care of people. And I don't know, I guess those are maybe two separate points, but those are two things that struck out to me. Kind of the history and the tradition of this kind of, we call it advocacy now, or care of creation, but the way it's present all the way back in, you look at the Christian tradition here, and that's fine, even though we call it different names. And then Sister Carmella, that linking it back up with people. Oftentimes I feel like there's a disconnect between the environment and people. I don't know, can do either one of you want to chime in on those 2 points?
I know it's always important to me to think about health issues, so I'll let others speak.
I don't know how you can talk about care of creation without talking about the people who live on this in creation. In the book of Genesis, when God creates the world, we're the last ones. And we have the responsibility of caring for all that God created. And I don't think that during the Industrial Revolution here in the United States, and then even the development of manufacturing, that we took into consideration people. I think it's been a sad commentary that the focus of government in many instances has been money and greed. We have to produce more coal, make more steel, cut down the trees, develop whatever is necessary. I mean, even in my generation, and I'm getting old here, think of the problems we've had with nuclear power and the waste from nuclear power and how that's contaminated water and soil and air. We seem to be slow on the uptake of our responsibility to take care of one another. And in taking care of one another, we take care of creation so that each one of us has a quality of life.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
There is a question that has come through in the chat section. Let me get back to it here. And that is there a plan for further than the letter campaign? Yes, we with West Virginia Interfaith Power and Light, the group that originated this letter, plan to keep the letter campaign active for at least another couple of months, likely until the end of this year, to garner as many participants as we possibly can. And beyond that, we hope to engage in initiatives that are led by the Concerned Ohio River Residents Group and others in the immediate area. There's a faith community group that Father Michael has participated in called the Ohio Valley Interfaith Consortium, and we would hope to lend our voices to anything that those two groups are initiating going forward, is our plan, but others may want to respond to that too from other perspectives.
Well, I know here in the Upper Ohio Valley, from time to time, we've had public meetings that have been advertised online in the newspapers, in the social media. And we have invited government officials to come and talk with us. Many times they don't show up, but we usually have a real stalwart, hardy group of advocates for the petrochemical industry not to come to our area. I don't know if any future public meetings are scheduled, but we have had many in the past.
Well, hey, I can speak. In the past, there have been the public meetings. Some of us have actually shown up as the county commissioners.
Mhm.
This conversation is extremely important that we continue it, because if this particular monster does not happen to come our way, you can be sure that somebody's going to come up with the next idea, which will be the same kind of extractive heavy industry that we used to have and has been proposed here. And until we come up with a viable alternative that makes extractive, abusive industry obsolete, it's going to keep coming back. It's the easy way to go, even if it doesn't actually meet any of the needs. So it's extremely important, the letter writing, the continued conversations that we have, the continued activity. Because this plastics plant came in and it was already years in the process before anybody locally even noticed that it was happening. The permits had already been put out, the arrangements had already been made. So it's extremely important. The next time Jobs Ohio decides to drop $64 million on an economic program in the Valley, it might go to small entrepreneurs instead of foreign corporations. Very important the conversation continues.
Very much, Mike.
Well, and the main companies that were involved, that are involved in the petrochemical plant at Dilly's Bottom, are not United States companies. They are companies outside the country. And they get all kinds of exemptions from the environmental laws, as well as taxation and property development and so on. So that's another consideration that we have to take when we have meetings, is to make sure people understand that this project and the others along the Ohio River that are proposed are not going to bring in as much tax money as they think, because the companies, as part of their compensation for coming, get tax exemptions or tax breaks, and that means that the tax money that the individual citizens pay is going to have to be the source of their development, the company's development.
That's right, sister. We like to say, if fossil fuels made an area rich, then Appalachia would be the richest place in the world.
Amen.
And we know that it's not. Robin, I see that you linked or shared the link to the faith letter in the chat there.
Sarah did that, for us. Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah did that.
It is, yes, for anyone joining us, there is a link in the chat now for the Faith Leaders Letter campaign. And let me just say a few words about how this works. It's not a sign-on letter, as some of you may have participated in the past. It's actually a spot where you can send out, I believe, up to 5 or 6 letters to different decision makers related to this plant. And so we encourage you to go to that site and to participate in that, send out the letters at your convenience. And we would really like to get more people participating in this. To date, we've had close to 80 people participating. We'd like to bump that up to around 100 or more within the next month or so. So again, please participate in that, and it will be shareable to other people who might be concerned, like we hope all of you are. Any other questions? Check the chat here.
We do have a couple of questions in the chat, one from Ben Hunkler and another one from Brendan. And also it looks like Joan has a question.
Would any of you like to speak your question live? I think you just need to unmute yourself if so.
Joan, do you want to read yours?
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you all for these videos. I really appreciated each of your presentations. I'm wondering how you envision this more localized regional economy that prioritizes people over capital, and what are the steps we can take to make that vision a reality?
There is a Reimagine Appalachia plan that OVEC has participated in developing, and I believe some of the others on this meeting have also participated in developing that. We could potentially link that into the chat as well, or send it out afterwards. We just, as Father Michael said so eloquently, we need to focus on what people here can do and have been able to do for decades. There's a lot of incredible history of craftsmanship, herbology, farming, artisanship that could lead to a lot of entrepreneurial concerns, a lot of entrepreneurial initiatives. So we'd like to see more of that and more funding for those kind of things, I believe. But I'll let others respond as well.
I think that's pretty right on, Robin. Let's see, the way you were talking there makes me think of two resources. One is a book called Ramp Hollow. If you've heard of that, it's kind of after 2016 when people started thinking about who are these Appalachians that, you know, can actually make a difference in the country. First there was, what was the one, Hillbilly Elegy, which it was an effort to start a conversation, and I'll appreciate it for that. There were some other ones, but I think Ramp Hollow does a really good job at describing what Robin was talking about there, that for a long time, from like while the country was forming to even in the Industrial Revolution, the people of Appalachia were kind of defined by their self-sufficiency and that entrepreneurial spirit that Robin was talking about. Living economically kind of independent and free in that way. And the other resource, let's look at this. It's interesting because a lot of these questions are economic, and we don't tend maybe to think about kind of church and faith in economic terms. But I've been surprised. We have Sister Carmella on here as well. So you have two Catholic voices. You'll have to bear with us, our other Christian brothers and sisters. But there's a lot of conversation I've found that I wasn't aware of in the Catholic Church, encyclicals and teachings about what constitutes a just economic system. Oftentimes our economic conversations have focused on like communism, and there the objections aren't, you know, most of those systems are state atheisms. So for people of faith, that's a tough sell. And they don't really get into the economic questions that communism's rival, capitalism, brings up. And now I think a lot of those points are being fleshed out. And Pope Francis, like Sister Carmella talks about, he talks about unfettered capitalism and some of the problems that just we've seen. And again, I'm not going to get on here and say that capitalism is an absolute failure and we need to stop it. But at the same time, looking just at the economics, what has worked, what hasn't worked, and what are the moral obligations, and what do people of faith, in the example of, whether it's Jesus or Moses or Muhammad, have to say about this. So.
Thanks.
So this is Joan here. I'm in New Mexico, but I just popped on in the midst of my workday because this came across my desk. And in New Mexico, we're a huge contributor to CO2 and methane. We have all of this extractivism in the Permian Basin. And our gas is going to cracker plants in Texas that they're building that folks are trying to stop. So just a shout out to all of you for your good work of organizing, and that solidarity among these issues is really important, and solidarity with wherever the this gas is coming from with those people, and to get them to sign your letter and other things. The other element I was wondering about is if you've taken in the investor route, because there are many folks who have managers, investment managers, especially religious organizations, and they meet with CEOs and try to address that in that area. That's another aspect. With these issues, at least here in New Mexico, we've taken many paths to engagement and trying to deal with it. But great, thank you so much. And just in solidarity with you from the West. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. And I'd love to talk to you more about things that you've done there in New Mexico, because it may be instructive to us. I think we're at the, not exactly start, but very early on in the development of these cracker plants and pipelines and underground storage facilities, whereas Texas and Gulf Coast areas have been dealing with this for a while. And we honor that struggle and would like to learn from it and see how we can also, add our voice there too. So thanks a lot for joining us today and asking that. To your question as to whether we have worked to engage financial institutions, I would say there's some discussion about that, but it's not quite happened yet. At least not in terms of the Appalachian Storage Hub. I know there's been some effort to work on removing bank financing from mountaintop removal, operation funding, and that kind of thing. That's coal-related efforts that have happened in this region. West Virginia, Ohio River, the eastern side of Ohio, are two places where there's both extensive coal extraction that has happened and natural gas extraction. So that's, we're dealing with the double whammy of one industry that's fading, another one that's rising. Is there a follow-up, Jen?
Is there a follow-up, Jen?
No, well, we just lost you. We couldn't hear you, Rob.
Oh, sorry about that. My mic fades. Yeah, I was saying that West Virginia and the eastern side of Ohio, the mountainous area of Ohio, near the Ohio River Basin, is two places where there's extensive coal extraction and oil and gas extraction. So we kind of have the double whammy of, so.
Right.
The first thing that could help, if I may, the most obvious investor in our particular PTT cracker plant is the state of Ohio. Jobs Ohio has dumped $64 million into moving dirt around in hopes that somebody will come from Thailand to exploit the valley. How could we move to a different paradigm? The day that $64 million is offered to small entrepreneurs to build diverse economic activity here in the valley, so that the profits, never mind the taxes, the profits have been going out of the valley for more than a century. whether it was the coal and steel, or now it's the gas and plastics and chemicals. Look at Parkersburg. Where's the profit from DuPont in Parkersburg? Now PTT and the cracker plant or the Shell plant up in Beaver County that's already in place, those profits are all going elsewhere. We need something that is, we need a process wherein our own public authorities are fostering and investing economically in profits that will stay local to the area. That's the first thing on it. And beyond that, if we're going to take care of, I wanted to speak to Sister Carmella and justice for the people. Pope Francis expressed it wonderfully, and I'm not Catholic, but Pope Francis expressed it wonderfully when he said, you can't take care of the people if you don't take care of the river that they live next to. You can't take care of the river if you don't take care of the people. They are intimately, inescapably linked. And this particular cracker plant, if it goes in, assuming that one believes that the climate has become a little more interesting recently, this particular plant is designed to put out a ton of, literally 2,000 pounds, a ton of carbon dioxide every 18 seconds. 1,785,043 tons per year. And we need to stop. If we want the planet, if we want the people, if we want the elite to survive, they've got to stop doing that. God will not smile if we trash the gift. Now I will mute myself and stop ranting.
Father Michael, that wise words again, for sure. We have a couple other comments and questions in chat. I see a comment from Will Smith, the First Congregational Church in Huntington. Will, do you want to speak? Or he says, we live in a society that only focuses on the me. God calls us to focus on we, and that includes not just human life, but all life.
Amen.
So thank you for that. And then Brendan had a question in there. Brendan, would you like to speak?
Yeah, sorry, I meant to say that. So my question is like, how do we engage the workers in these industries through a faith-based perspective, given the fact that, you know, the Ohio Valley is very diverse religiously? Like, how do we sort of hone in this message to the people in those industries without sort of dividing based on religious identification?
Great question.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take a stab unless any Sister Carmella or Monk Mike, you're chomping at the bit.
No.
Brendan, you bring up a really good point about the diversity of Appalachia, and I think that's often overlooked. So I think I'll give you props just for naming it. One thing that I find affirming, oftentimes in religion, you see many parallels across religion or non-religion for that matter. And, you know, the kind of quintessential example is the golden rule, right? It's been formulated pretty much by human society. What I think Hammurabi, they like to point to, as one of the first to write it down outside of the Abrahamic traditions. But you can find that in just about any of the, you know, cultures of the world. And in the same way that, as both myself, Sister Carmella, and Father Michael have alluded to, in the Christian tradition, this connection between the environment and humanity goes all the way back to the beginning, to Genesis, as we say. That is a human condition. It is part of being human to be part of and connected to nature. So, you know, we all share that, and we can use that language. That's at least a common denominator that I think we can rely on and use. On the flip side, recognizing the diversity of people, I appreciate reaching people in the ways that they identify with. Pastor Robin as a Presbyterian minister, right? As a Presbyterian. Monk Mike as an Orthodox Christian. Our allies who are atheists, nuns, as a lot of people like to identify. I think it's really important to recognize people's identities and the language that they use, that they experience and live their lives, and tap into that. You know, it's part of what, as a Catholic, there is appeal to the language that the Catholic Church uses to talk about issues. And in that, Pastor Robin is a Presbyterian. I want to affirm her way of understanding the world. Again, not at the exclusion of others. And hopefully, you know, as a diverse people, we can recognize that and affirm that. So kind of two sides, reaching a common denominator and then also affirming what makes us different and special. Does that help address your question at all?
Yes, it does. Part of the reason why I was a religious studies major, so thank you for reaffirming that decision that I had as well.
Bravo, sir. Brendan, I've got a comment, though, that I want to put in on it. And that is, as far as if you're talking to labor, if you're talking to workers, to start with, forget the religion. They don't need, you know, if you're talking to the pipe fitters labor union, it will resonate with them, because if we do have some kind of industry come in and there's proper environmental regulation on it, they get to fit more pipes to make the industry work. If we just meet the people with, you know, there's an awful lot of people that break out in hives. They're allergic to the word religion. They might admit to being spiritual, but not religious. That horrible religion stuff. Yeah, it's like walking around without any bones. It doesn't work. But we don't have to wear our religion sign all of the time. We meet the people where they are and speak to them in the language that they actually are concerned with. And for an awful lot of people during the week, on their ordinary things, they're concerned about taking care of their livelihood, their job. There's so many wonderful stories of, and the theologian came to speak to the old monk, and he was waiting for 2 hours because there was an old woman that was concerned about her sick turkeys. I think it was Mahatma Gandhi that said, if God's to come to the people, he has to come in the form of bread. And I've had the experience of literally having a grave digger in the cemetery come up to me and say he had seen me on a television report of the permit hearings on the cracker plant, and told me, you were the only one that made any sense. That's ridiculous. A monk's the only one that makes any sense when talking about this. But he wasn't interested in my religion. He was interested in, how do we live our lives? And if that happens to come from a religious person, so much the better. But meet the people where they are in the vocabulary that they are. There's nothing more dynamic in climate discussions than having Catherine Haytho, the climate scientist and committed evangelical Christian down in Texas, saying the science is real and it's a spiritual issue. Yes, if they are open to our language, if I'm speaking to my own congregation in the pews on Sunday morning, I use one sort of vocabulary. But if I'm talking to the Rotary Club, I say, well, your own Rotarian magazine says that climate change is real, it is dangerous, and here are good Rotarian principled responses to solve this problem. Meet them where they are. Oh, and it happens to flow out of the fact that God cares about this world. That's why I have to do it, because God cares about this world. But I don't use necessarily overtly religious language. Meet the people wherever they are and use the language that they can hear. Time out.
Father Michael.
I'd just like to add a comment. We're dealing with companies and government who are interested in money and tax base and all that kind of thing. And I think one of the things that we fail to remember is we have the power of our own money. When you purchase, when you invest, check it out. I recently read that the college students, many college students in the United States, and I understand that they have learned this from student organizations in Europe and Asia, they are working to get the colleges to disenfranchise themselves from investing in fossil fuels or industries that pollute the universe. And they have been very successful. And that's the only language companies understand. If you don't give me the money, then how am I going to make whatever my product is or take the fuel out of the soil, out of the environment? And I think sometimes as people of faith, I think sometimes we think that thinking about money is not very religious and it goes against our faith. And that's not true. I don't know. It seems to me we have the power of purchasing, we have the power of investment. Maybe not individually, but maybe the diocese or whatever your church organization is. I know most faith groups have some sort of funding that they invest in so they can get a return on it to do the good works that are necessary to carry on the message of our faith. Vincent works with the House of Hagar. You don't function on air. That doesn't work. And so we have to hit the companies where it hurts, in their pocketbooks. And investment, purchasing power, and the college students may have something. I don't know, but it just seems to me that they've made a tremendous success. And again, this is coming from my Catholic background, and I make sure that I say that. But the students in Georgetown, which is one of the very largest Catholic universities in the United States, they got Georgetown to disenfranchise themselves from a great deal of their investments in fossil fuel companies. That's within the past 2 years. So, I think we have to understand that it's not religious not to recognize power's not a dirty word. And we have the power of our own people, and I hope we have the power of our faith, and hit them where it hurts, in their pocketbooks. And we can do that.
I wanted
With
to
your
jump
money.
in.
Sure,
I
go
wanted
ahead,
to
James.
I wanted to jump in and add something. At my day job, I'm a professor at Ohio University Eastern. We had the situation a year or two ago where there was a pipeline that wanted to come through our property. And there was a fair amount of concern among the faculty and staff and some, desire to kind of want to do something to resist that. This connects to the earlier comment about Ohio Jobs and what, the way they kind of provided the seed money to get this cracker plant thing started. But in our trying to work with the administration of Ohio University in Athens, and then also with the state of Ohio, we basically were told pretty explicitly that that pipeline was going to happen, and whether we liked it or not, and if we were helpful, we would get a little bit of money out of it in terms of the leasing of the land. But if we weren't helpful, then we wouldn't. So there wasn't sort of much option given to us by the state. So there's one of the issues that the question of what can higher education do. Unfortunately, at the moment, higher education is hanging on by its fingernails, especially in the state of Ohio.
Yeah, there's all kinds of complicating factors with all of this. Ben actually put in the, and thanks for your insights, James, from your faith community perspective. I don't know if you want to say a few words about that or not, but we welcome all perspectives here. And West Virginia Interfaith Power and Light actually has a Buddhist member on our steering committee. So, we do, she wasn't able to be with us today, but yeah, we do appreciate that perspective. We are at, or a little past 5 o'clock. Of course, we started a little bit late. This has been a very rich discussion. I just want to say one final thing about the specific letter campaign we're running right now. I often get asked, who can sign this? Do I have to be a preacher or a faith community leader, have to be ordained or something? No. Anyone can sign this from any faith or spiritual group perspective, or even a concerned citizen perspective out of the passion that you feel for your own family, etc. So we encourage you to pass that along to anyone you know who might be interested in participating in that. Are there any other, people with a passionate comment or question that needs to be spoken here today? This event, which is the first event we've tried to do surrounding this Faith Leaders Letter initiative, has been incredibly rich, and it has made me think maybe we should do some things like this more often. So we will certainly put out notices like that if that comes to fruition. And I will be very sure to let folks know what the next steps are going to be from West Virginia Interfaith Power and Light and our various allies, including OVEC, Concerned Ohio River Residents, and the faith leaders in the Belmont County area. We'll be sure to put out information about that via the networks that we have formed already through this Faith Leaders Letter initiative. So thanks everyone for your time and for being part of this tonight. And look for a recording of this to be posted on the Ohio Valley Environmental Coalition's Facebook site this evening. I'll also share that to West Virginia Interfaith Power and Light's Facebook site. And you'll probably see it pop up some other places as well. So I think if no one has any other burning questions or insights to share, then I think we're going to say good evening and go enjoy some of the sunshine that's out there today in the Ohio River Valley, if you're calling in from there, because it is a beautiful day out there today. That's why we're all doing this, to preserve beauty in this world.